Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. My name is Tom Ricks, and I'm going to be talking about the Georgia election. Long story short, the entire fate of the entire fucking world depends on people getting up off of their asses and voting in this special election that's going to happen on January 5th. And I think that the main reason I wanted to do a podcast episode is not just the importance of this, but it also capsulizes a whole lot of things I've been thinking about doing an episode about, right? So I've been thinking about resuming my Sins of Silicon Valley podcast because of the just horrific job that Twitter and Facebook have been doing about preventing the delegitimization of the election by Trump and his fascist supporters. We have never, ever had a stronger case for constitutional reform, or in my opinion, a new constitution. We need a whole lot of cultural fixes and cultural reforms because we're fighting a culture war, and those are the only things that matter. But ultimately, I decided that this was the episode I needed to make. And I think as a visual example, there's a movie that's quite excellent, especially for fans of war films, called Stalingrad, that is essentially about two dueling snipers that took place during the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II. And the intro to the movie talks about how precarious the war was at the point of this battle, because it was before D-Day. It was before we had started to triumph in the Pacific. And despite, in retrospect, how, quote, obvious, end quote, it seems that we would win, it was a lot more scary to the people at the time. And in part, that was because of how absolutely deadly the Axis powers, both Japan and Italy, and especially Germany, were in crushing the old world powers using new techniques, et cetera, et cetera. It has this map that shows the various fronts in the war, and it shows how the Germans have just basically marched into Russia and brought it to its knees. And this is before the absolutely heroic turnaround that the Russian people did in basically re-engineering their entire society to a wartime culture to produce whatever it took to fight this off. The Russian army they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing, and they were being crushed by the Nazis. But here you had this sniper that was killing a lot of freaking Nazis, and so they brought in their own sniper, and these two had it out. And the argument that the movie makes is that the entire fate of the war was decided at this point. And, based on my understanding of the historical context, I kind of have to agree, which is to say that if the Soviets had lost the Battle of Stalingrad, the time that they needed, just like England had the time to rebuild their air force because of the Blitz and Hitler's focus on London, if the Soviets had lost the Battle of Stalingrad, we would be toast. We would all be speaking German. The arguments that the Germans could never develop the bomb is ridiculous, and all you have to do is watch The Man in the High Castle to see what happens if the Germans had gotten the bomb, and it's bad. And the Germans absolutely did investigate the bomb. They made some serious miscalculations, but World War II was by no means as simple as World War II films, especially post-World War II films, make it seem. And right now, in the state of Georgia, we have two senators up for election. One is a special election, and the other was a regular senatorial election. we have 48 Republicans and 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats. And because of the extremely flawed design of our Constitution, you need the Senate to confirm everything. You need the Senate to confirm the basic nominees that Biden has to do his job as president. Any kind of reform is very difficult to accomplish without the Senate, especially with Mitch McConnell, right? Let's remember that there is almost no bipartisanship left, right? Those of you who think that you can reach across the aisle and reason with the Mitt Romneys of the world and the Susan Collins need to remember who Susan Collins and Mitt Romney is, right? Both of them have voted for very questionable things, including not to impeach Donald Trump. Okay? You need to understand that there is no compromise with these people, right? This isn't just about the freedom of America. This is about climate change. We had the most horrific hurricane season that we have had in recorded history. And the planet is only getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And the fact of the matter is that we need radical reform. We need radical action to fix this country, not just in terms of the culture war or the political damage we have with 72 million fascists in this country that do not believe in democracy anymore and that question the legitimacy of the Constitution of the United States if they're not in charge. Let me repeat that. We have 72 million people in this country that do not believe that Donald Trump lost the election. I'm sorry, technically speaking, if we say 85% of 72 million, that's something approaching 65 million people. 65 million fucking Nazis in this country. You cannot eliminate that by treading water. Joe Biden, assuming he actually wants to take action to fix this horrendous cultural damage, cannot do that without a Senate. Now, the Democrats are planned to win in 2022, but if you think that we can sit on our asses and wait for 2 years to fix the cultural changes that we need to have, to fix the political changes that we need to have, we need to move forward, not just undo the damage that Trump did. If we don't meaningfully change as a society, we are doomed. I want you, if you have the time, to watch a show from the 70s and 80s called Connections. And the original intent of the show is to explain the idea that a lot of our ideas do not come from a vacuum. They are a series of luck, but also cultural movements and broad things that come together to bring about a thing that we have, right? Sometimes a single individual can make a huge difference, right? I think a really good example of that is the smartphone, right? It took Steve Jobs to actually make a useful version of the smartphone and the iPhone. We had the technology for a couple of years before that, but it took an individual to look at it and build it in a way that people actually wanted to use it. Whereas something like the electronic light, lots and lots and lots of people were doing that. Edison isn't quite as brilliant as a lot of people want to think he is. I mean, he's brilliant in exploiting other people's work, but the fact of the matter is that if Edison was wiped from the timeline, I'm not 100% sure that it would be as big a change as you think it would. Whereas without the smartphone, we would be in a very different place, right? We might have something approaching a smartphone, but it would probably be really ugly compared to what we have now. And the fact of the matter is that individuals do make a difference. Stacey Abrams heroically turned Georgia blue. And there is every possibility that it can stay blue. But we have to remember that there is a corrupt Republican governor, a corrupt Republican Secretary of State, and I don't care if he is ethical enough to challenge the fact that Trump didn't win the election. The fact is he's still a Republican, and the fact is that even if he's a Romney Republican, he's probably just fine with the Supreme Court justice, and he's already looking out at tossing out hundreds of thousands of votes and registrations to vote. So the fact of the matter is that this is going to be tight, and this is in a state that is notorious for electoral corruption and questionable electoral results. That's the reason Stacey Abrams has created this impressive organization. But the fact of the matter is that if the people of Georgia don't vote, and if they don't exert pressure on the non-voters to get up off their ass and go and take 5 minutes to an hour to actually vote, we are all totally screwed. The fate of the freaking world depends on this election. You think I'm wrong? I want you to think about how fascism is spreading across the world, just like we used to imagine that communism was in the so-called domino theory, right? Fascism has spread to every government in Europe. The far right is getting election results in higher numbers than they ever have in Europe. There are 2 openly fascist governments in Europe. Russia and China and the Philippines and Venezuela are illiberal democracies. Again and again, I'm sorry, China's not an illiberal democracy, but it's certainly a fascist government. And they are openly aggressive and spreading their policies all around the world. And if there is no United States to challenge them, it's not going to be Europe. It's not going to be Russia. Who will stand up for democracy if the United States is not able to do so? Let me repeat that. Who in the world is going to champion democracy if it's not the United States? If we are so busy with our internal problems because of the 72 million fascists we have in this country, that we cannot help ourselves and help our brothers around the world, brothers and sisters around the world, who's going to do it? Europe? I don't think so. Europe can't even pass a freaking budget without unanimous consent. Europe has its own house to fix before it's going to help anybody else. And the United States of America is going to be way too busy twiddling its thumbs for at least 2 years if we do not win both Senate seats in Georgia. It's going to be hard enough with guys like the senator from West Virginia or Dianne Feinstein, who likes to hug Lindsey Graham, who, by the way, this is the same Lindsey Graham who has attacked the governor of Georgia because he's not working hard enough to suppress the election and put Führer Trump in power, right? So don't tell me that this election isn't important. Don't tell me that your vote doesn't matter. Don't tell me that you want to vote for a third party in an election where you literally can only vote for 2 parties. Right? Don't tell me there's no difference between the 2 parties, because there is. The fate of the entire world rests on a couple of million people in a southern state that has remarkably, blessedly, and thankfully saw the light, and enough people in that state got up their asses and voted for Biden. Whether or not you like Biden, it doesn't matter. It matters that Trump is inherently evil and a threat to all life on the planet. Not just humans, all life on the freaking planet. And the fact of the matter is that if you're not willing to take the time to vote, in my opinion, you should have that right taken from you.
We will. This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright 2020.
To fight the forces of evil!